Well, thank you very much, everybody. I would like to take the opportunity to just talk about some of the projects that we've been working on over the last while. Projects such as our Indigenous engagement, our LIDAR, and our Netley Marsh Renewal. So I want to take it back. This is a picture of our January conference in 2018. It was held in Winnipeg. And it was really great because we had Indigenous engagement with 3 levels of government on all issues of water governance and water management. And there you can see levels of federal government, provincial government, state government, county, municipality, and they all came together with our First Nations leaders to talk about the importance of engaging First Nations in water governance. And we are lucky because from that meeting, we had the opportunity to sign an MOU with the Southern Chiefs Organization. And that MOU was to give us guidance on moving forward, not only working with the nations, but working with the nations hand in hand in order to allow them an opportunity to be part of the decision making when it comes to water governance. So from that MOU, they asked us to engage more of the First Nations leaders. And from that, we had a conference in September of 2019 called One Basin, One Governance. And we invited First Nations leaders across the country from Alberta all the way to Ontario, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. And it was really wonderful because we had the opportunity to clearly hear the message from our First Nations leaders and the importance of water governance and the importance of them being part of it. So before you hear some of the chiefs that attended, but I really wanted to look at Chief Lorraine Comas and her message to us, and she said, when we have these relations, you will see great successes, and you will not do this without us. It will not happen without us. We need to do this together. And I really believe that resonates the feelings of all the chiefs on the importance of working together to build successes. So we're pleased to say that our final report will be coming out next month. It'll be a path forward. There's a lot of great work going on, at least that I'm aware of in Manitoba, by the provincial government, through water engagement for the First Nations, for all of us. And we want to be able to help build on that and add to it. So we're looking forward to be able to release that report. I next want to talk to you about some of the efforts that we've been putting forward with our LIDAR work and LIDAR for the river basin. I can tell you, I think you all know what LIDAR is. And I think the second and third bullet point tells you exactly, the method of taking very precise, accurate measurements using LiDAR instruments located on aircrafts. And these are really extremely useful for planning drainage projects, retention projects, restoration of wetlands, doing infrastructure work. LiDAR has great value, but what we found here is that we did not have it through our whole area. And as I said, we really needed it because what we found in the prairies, especially on the Red River Basin area, being so flat, we really lost a lot of our retention areas and our wetlands. And now with climate change, we're looking at the need of addressing, carbon storage, reducing nutrient load to the Lake Winnipeg to make it healthier. And all these things have other positive consequences or actions. Results coming from that would be like wildlife habitat, recreation, more infrastructure development based on better decision making, and numerous other usage like autonomous cars. We're all looking for here, we're heading toward electric vehicles, and they're talking about driverless vehicles, and that's all done with LiDAR as well. So what you see before you is the map of the Manitoba area, and I'm focused on this because after the 97 flood, the US portion of the Red River Basin, the LiDAR was all flowing. So from 2006 on, we felt it was important to be able to do that equally because a lot of our partners, such in the Pembina area or the Rosa River area, we have the rivers crossing on both sides of the border. We really wanted to be able to work together and to synchronize our information and all be talking from the same page. So we started to do that. And this map before you now is showing where we were with LiDAR in 2019. I know it's a lot of different colors and you may not be able to read the board up in the corner, but basically all the darker grayish tan were items that were taken prior to 2013 as far as picked up, and that would have been because of the 1997 flood, and we started collecting LiDAR in the basin in 1999. And we've constantly worked on it in small pieces when the province was able to do that. But the partnership that we developed with the provincial government and obtaining funding from ourselves, looking for grants, and the municipalities who partnered with us in the watersheds, we're pleased to say that they're mostly all the same color now. And even from the last uptake, which was flown in 2020, the province, based on the partnership, was able to refly the Red River corridor all the way from the border out to Lake Winnipeg. So LiDAR for the Red River, what's our successes? Like I said, the LiDAR data is now all obtained in our area of Manitoba. A lot of the areas have updates, and we think that's going to be very, very useful as we work together and partner with our surrounding watersheds and municipalities and the province. We're able to also develop a level of educational videos and an educational manual. So those municipalities, those counties who are not used to utilizing LiDAR have the opportunity to be self-teaching themselves. So you could go online, you watch a video, you go through the first chapter of the manual, and the two come together, and it gives you a basic understanding of what you have to do when you sit down in front of your computer and look at that GIS program or maybe that PTM application. And the other thing we were able to complete is a north and south region climate adaptation plans, very high level, but still enough to allow the municipalities to understand the value of the climate adaptation plan and to also see the value of them maybe working on it further and detailing it for maybe their watershed region, coming together with the municipalities they partner with. So here's the first slide, LiDAR and climate adaptation planning. What is LiDAR? And we had a total of 13 videos, and the last one is LiDAR and climate adaptation planning and the benefits of natural infrastructure for climate resilience. So if anybody's interested in looking at this, just go online. You can go to the YouTube channel, search RRBC, and you'll see all this information there. Or go to our QR code and hit that, and so you'll see the links for all this stuff, and it's easy and accessible. And again, as I told you, we did the climate adaptation high-level plans for the southern region, and we were able to present that. That was the last one we presented, which happened on December of 13 of last year here. So just recently, it was well taken in. We had about 176 people signed up for that, so it was amazing. So what are our next steps for LiDAR? Well, we really want, now that we have the data, we want to continue to work with people and try to support them, promote them, and partner with them. If you have a project that you would like the Red River Basin to be working with you on and to partner with you on, come and talk to us. We're there, whether it's on the south side or the north side, or maybe we're talking to our municipalities who are communicating quite well now, right at the borders, right? I think it's really important. We want to increase our video and our manual educational series. So we have a beginner series. We want to elevate that. We want to bring that up to an intermediate and an advanced level so that those who are in the counties and the municipalities, they can get onto the computer. Again, they can self-teach themselves and carry that forward. And the last one is supporting the creation of the more detailed adaptation plans for all our watershed regions. Now, the last project I want to speak to you about is the Netley Marsh project. We started working with our partners probably back in 2017, talking to them about really, what do they want seen done. The Netley Marsh has really been changed, and it's been human manipulation that has changed it over the years. It's been a number of other factors, and I'll get into that. But the first thing I really want to talk about that I'm really proud about is the partners here. It's just unbelievable. The University of Manitoba, you can see the list before you. And each and every one of these organizations are strong enough that they could have carried this project themselves, but they all came together because they realized that the importance of building and repairing on the Netley Marsh is fundamental to the health of Lake Winnipeg, and that we are stronger together under partnership. And that's what the Red River Basin is all about, creating partnerships in order to look for successes. Now, the success of this is that we've been able to get it off the ground and we got it moving, and it took a lot of work. And we can't not look at our funding partners as well. And, and a special shout out to the Selkirk District Foundation, who was the first financial contributor, which really was the catalyst of getting all the funding on the table for this project. And it's because of both the project partners and the funding partners that we've been able to build on this success. So a little bit about the structure itself. So all those folks that make up the partnership are parts of the project steering committee. We're trying to meet 1 or 2 times per year, but I will tell you, as you heard from everybody else, COVID is making that really hard to do. So it was a lot of phone conversations over the last few years and working together. And, we still got out to do some of the presentations. We had to do our consultation with our First Nations and Métis communities, but it was difficult to bring the committees together to work. And of course, the Science Advisory Committee, which they always met as needed. And, hats off to all those people, because without them, I don't think we would have been able to build this success so far. So let's get into some more details here. Before you is the Netley Lake. The top of this picture, it's off of Google, of course, and you can see Lake Winnipeg. And you can see the Red River, which runs through the marsh area and out to the lake. This Netley Lake is the largest coastal freshwater wetlands in North America. It's over 250 square kilometers, and it's turning from a marsh to basically muddy lakes. And as I said earlier, it's happening because of human manipulation and a number of things. And again, I'll go over that sooner, as I said before. So here's a picture of the marsh in 1923. And I don't know if you can see the top right corner, you can see Netley Creek dumping into that area. But to your right, you're going to see all those plots of little vegetation groups and waters. Well, that's called a hemi-marsh, half water, half land. And the waters of the marsh would be washed in. And as those nutrient-rich waters would come in and flow over the marsh and would go out, the vegetation would grab the nutrients and pull it down and utilize it for a food source and start building that growth within the root systems. Well, a lot has changed since 1923, and that little piece to your right where you see the water flowing into the marsh, that's called the Natalie Cut. And if you look really close, you can see things that are put in front of it. Well, it's certain they were trying to close it even back then, but it's certainly changed, because this is the Natalie Cut today, and before you see the south side of that cut. And the reason we're showing this picture is because the cut is now bigger than the river, and it's very difficult to show it in the entire picture. But what's amazing is all that vegetation you saw in the old picture, that does not exist anymore. And it's really terrible. And the fact that the water is running in at a massive rate into the marsh now is that we've created a major problem where we're basically flooding out the marsh. So what's causing the vegetation loss? Well, it's infrequent low water periods. And when the water used to go really, we had those variations, the vegetation had an opportunity to take hold again. And usually once it took hold, it would last for a number of years. And you had that system of high and low waters. And that's happening for a number of reasons. One of them is we manage Lake Winnipeg. We utilize it for Manitoba Hydro. We have to have it. We need our heat. We need our lights. And really, that portion only takes the extreme highs and lows out of the system. It doesn't manipulate it to the point that it's really 100% affecting it, but it is a little bit part of it. The other part is that we're agriculture. We want to get it off the land. We want to get our crops in. We want to get our crops into the bin. I mean, that's the idea of it. We've kind of lost that thinking of retention. We all know this. We've heard a number of presentations over the last day and a half here on the importance of now trying to reestablish that. And the next bullet point of wetland loss and retention. Well, the prairies have probably lost 60 to 70% of their wetlands, and those waters that used to sit there and were held and captured where the nutrients would be taken out no longer exists. So we're hitting that water is hitting the ditches faster, it's coming in quicker, and it is just flushing itself through. And to add to that, we have gone through a wet climate cycle. And I can contest to that when I used to sit in council and we were dealing with constant flooding. And now over the last few years, we're talking drought, and it really turned very quickly. And the last thing, of course, is ice breaking. And we needed then to break the ice on the Red River because we constantly saw major ice jams, we saw major flooding. So not only would we deal with flooding from the spring melt coming off the Red River Basin, but those who were north would deal with ice-induced flooding from ice jams. And there were times where I can remember numerous homes being washed away from the ice floats. And now with ice breaking, we break that down to the cut, but now it has a side effect where we're putting more than 50% of the Red River into the marsh because we've broken the ice to that point to prevent flooding. So one good thing, one bad thing. So that's some of the things that have been creating the vegetation loss, but most of it is all due to the higher water. So before you, this picture is showing our study area, and right below the study area, you can kind of see the opening in the riverbank to the left. That's the Natalie Cut. You can actually see the canals that the water has been forced through during the spring melt has been making, but the study area is where we were utilizing for a deposit area, and I'll bring that into more details, but looking at this map, you can kind of get an idea of where the area is that we were working on. And this is a more pictured area of that, and the three colors that you're seeing were to put in there because we tried to utilize under the project three types of different retention. So we utilized aquadams, erosion control tubes, and Geo Tubes within this project. And I'll get more into detail on that as we go through and talk to you about the difficulties that we had when we were going forward in the project. So this is an Amphivax 400. This is the fleet that the province of Manitoba used when we had the ice breaking. This actual picture, if you want, you can go on to YouTube or go on to savenetleymarsh.com. That video link is in there. And you can actually watch this unit dredging one of the rivers down in Louisiana, where they're actually pumping the material off the dredge head, putting it over that riverbank, and they're creating their own hemi marsh. And we were really surprised to find this video because it did exactly what we're trying to do here, and it did so with great success. In the past, when they did this one, they had a small dredging machine, but when they brought the new Amphivax in, they were able to make over 10 acres of marsh within a short period of a few weeks, and it was amazing. So we're hoping that we can learn from others as we go forward and that we can build on the same type of success. Oh, I don't want to hit that video, so forgive me. And here's another picture. So in Louisiana, in the coastal wetlands, they're seeing a lot of shoreline loss, and they build themselves these vegetation wetland terraces or vegetation shelves, as we call them, in order to reestablish vegetation, but to also give protection. And this was another lesson that we learned. This was part of our homework as we looked at what was being done down in Louisiana, the Florida Keys, the Texas Panhandle. You know, the idea of the work that we're putting into the marsh is not new, but it's new to Manitoba, and we have to be able to address that on how that's going to work in the Netley Marsh based on the conditions within the Netley, such as winds and a shorter season of growth. So earlier in the color mapping, I was talking to you about the three types of containment. So we had to contain the pumping when we were dredging and the material coming over the riverbank into the containment area, and we needed to contain it in order to do siltation control. We had to give consideration to the fish that populated the area, and we didn't want to be able to create any harm. So one of those three lines were Geo Tubes, and you can see in this picture here, This is an actual picture that was taken with the drone, and it is one of the deposit areas. And you can see these gentlemen standing on those geo tubes as those geo tubes are starting to fill. What's really interesting for this, and I won't go into too much detail, but this is the area. So there'd be days that we'd be standing in there and there'd be absolutely no water. And then there was other days when the northwest wind would come in, and then suddenly you're into 3 or 4 feet of water to the point where maybe you have white caps and they're starting to breach the whole area. And this was one of the things that we really had to teach ourselves, is how do we deal with these challenges? And we've learned so much from this project on how to deal with those challenges. So to give you an idea of the project, as you can see from your far right, you see a launching area there. You can see some boats coming in. You see the 2 pumping lines, the amphibexes, where they're in there like with a rototiller head, and they're pumping the materials through the lines, and it's going all the way out. And from the picture to the left, you can see the deposit area. So the deposit area is going into the area which is lower than the licensed target area, and I'll use Imperial, which was 714.8. So this year, or sorry, last year, 2022, when we're pumping in the areas, it looks like we're pumping into some vegetation areas, but really, and I'll get into this later, that those are areas that are actually had no vegetation in them, but because of the low-lying area, the vegetation has automatically started to restructure itself and grow. To give you an idea of the distance, here's just one of the shots of the tubes that are laid out to the area going out. And if you look far into that picture, you can see a little bit of water toward the middle of the picture. And it was really a huge distance. So in order to get those machines pumping off the river and pumping into the deposit area, such as this here, it was a huge task. What was really interesting here is that what we learned from this is, as you can see, as we're pumping, this was the first area. And we had to utilize the first area because we've had complications within the further out areas, and I'll explain that soon. And really, part of what we learned here is that the amount of volume that we would be pumping through this system would be affected by the type of material we were pumping in. So when we did our sampling of the river bottom, we would find silt, sand, and clay. But it was never consistent in any one area. So you could be pumping and suddenly you got 8 feet of clay, or you got 8 feet of silt, or you got a mixture of all 3. And the person that was operating the amphibexes, the dredgers, had to be really careful on how they would work that out or play that out, because if you weren't, you could get a plugged line and suddenly you're down for 2 or 3 hours trying to unplug the line. And believe me, that happened many, many times. I can remember going out there and just become part of the crew and helping them deal with this plugging. But also some of the plugging came from other things that we were bringing in off the bottom of the river, such as fish nets. That was a terrible thing, and we hit those many times. But the funny thing is that here we were cleaning, and after we would walk over to the deposit area, one thing that really caught us by surprise is that we were finding golf balls, and we've found well over 100 golf balls that were probably dredged in off of the river bottom and pumped into the area. And those golf balls would have come from the city of Selkirk, which I'm going to take a guess was about 26 river kilometers away. So those golf balls would have been slowly pushing themselves down the river every year and making it to that point. So if we found that many balls on a little dredging area, we got a funny feeling that if somebody wanted to be raking the bottom, they could be golf ball rich. From this picture, I want to show you what's really interesting. You can see the tree line right at the bottom of the picture. And you can see the growth coming in to a point where the growth somewhat changes. And what this is because of the low lake levels. So we're sitting at usually 715 on Lake Manitoba. We were sitting around 712. That 3-foot variance really allowed an opportunity for vegetation to come up in areas where it wasn't before. And the different coloration within that vegetation of the cattails is a 1-year difference in growth. And a year ago, you could have gone out there and those cattails were maybe just a little few inches high, and it just it was mind-boggling that we would see that much growth over a very short period of time. You can see one of the Geo Tubes being placed out there. The other picture I showed you with the guy standing on the tube, they're standing out there again. Again, it gives you an idea of the distance that we had to pump the material. So let's talk about some of the barriers. As I showed you before in those pictures, we utilized 3 different types of barriers. Well, when we first went into the site, we were in probably about a week late. It took us a little while to deploy the materials on the site. And we thought that it was in our best interest to use aquadams and put them right across our licensed area for sealing so we could start pumping right away. Well, we found out very quickly that was not a great decision because we were not expecting Mother Nature to send the winds that she would send in those variances that I talked to you about, where you could have no water to 3 to 5 feet of water. They came at you constantly, and over the first week, that line of aqua tubes had to be restructured. And after the 3rd time, we felt it was in our best interest to pull the whole thing closer into shore so that at least we can get our filling going, and then we could build ourselves out in pieces as we went out. So that was the first thing that we learned, is that whatever defense you put in, you better make sure it's strong enough to deal with Mother Nature and what she's going to deliver you. So this is the second line of defense. It's a very interesting story here. You can see this is where we pulled our barriers back. You see a number of different types of containments. This picture was taken at a time when the water was really low. You can actually see the portions of the pumping where it was more siltation, and it was able to leach through the barriers in certain locations. And every day we were out there trying to stop that leakage, and it was really difficult. But what we found really interesting, you can see it from that picture, the outspill never went much further than that picture right there. And where we were so afraid of that blowing into the marsh and going all through, it never did. And there was actual times that the siltation levels were higher naturally within the marsh than what we were creating through the dredging process. So those lines of defense stayed in place, and we were able to complete our dredging and went forward to try to add a number of Geo Tubes into the system before our September 14th closeout date came on. So I want to talk a little bit about vegetation loss. So why has Netley Marsh changed so much? And yes, I said it was manipulated, and I gave you those reasons already, but really it comes down to high water level. The vegetation does not seem to grow very well when we get into any waters over 8 or 9 inches, and it will still grow. But if you're not having a variance of elevation, meaning the water's going up and down and there's periods where you're having low water, eventually we're finding that seems to drown out and the vegetation is lost. And the other part is our problems with carp, the invasive species. The common carp, they're very destructive. And if you're creating new vegetation, you're going in there, there's a good chance as they're trying to feed that they're going to come in and deroot your work. And this has all led over the years to a devegetation of the area. But as I told you earlier, that we've seen a major recovery over the last 2 years just to the fact that that water is lower. And you can see from some of these pictures there, the bottom 2, where you can see the darker areas of green or the lighter areas, there's a lot of new vegetation that's coming up. And what we really feel is that this is Mother Nature helping us prove her concept. The simplicity is make the bottom of the marsh to a level where vegetation will grow, and it will grow. And you can see from these pictures, when the water has been dropped and it's at a proper elevation, the vegetation is very quick to return. We found that based on some of the studies that we did at the Red River College, there's a huge seed bank in the siltation within the river bottom, and that really you don't even have to seed. Even though we seeded our area because it was part of our licensing, it's really felt that no seeding would be required after we did this dredging. As I'm coming to the end, I really wanted to show you this picture. So I talked to you about the revegetation in the area over the last couple of years because of the drought. And every year we'd be out in the fall, and really this was supposed to be an IBM important bird migration area. But we would go out there and we never really saw a lot of birds. But this year, based on a lot of the vegetation coming out, it was amazing. In this picture, that one day we were out there, there was literally hundreds or thousands of birds flying in the air, and it was really such a nice sight to see. To see and understand the fact that if you will, the old cornfield, if you will build it, they will come. Well, there you go, right there. Sorry about that. So what's next for the project? Well, for 2002, 2022 and 2023, we're having to do our monitoring and our reporting. But based on the fact that the province of Manitoba came in just toward the end of our licensing, and they gave us this, an additional 22 Geo Tubes, which we weren't able to get out, we are going to apply for an extension. What we're finding that's so good about the Geo Tubes is that they are staying in place. They are the best defense of the three that we utilize. And we have plans on planting each of the Geo Tubes. So the Geo Tubes are brought in, they're laid out, they're built to the heights within the license of 714.8. We'll be planting the tops of them with vegetation such as willows and cattail nodules. And then because the University of Manitoba did a water flow report for how the water is flowing within the marsh, we're going to place these so they act like snow fences, and they're going to start building. So not only do we get the fence and the protection of the work that we did this year from the Geo Tubes, but those Geo Tubes will become islands further out. And this is very similar to what they do in Louisiana, but the Geo Tubes will give us an opportunity to protect our work from the wind and from the carp. So that's really exciting for us. And then starting in 2023, well, shouldn't say starting, but we've already been working on a funded 5-year plan where we would like to have the opportunity to work for 5 years on restructuring this portion of the Netley Marsh, and then being able to take that information to see if it's worthwhile to do it for another 5 years thereafter. So again, I think it's important. I really want to thank all the partners that are part of this project. You see their logos before you. They're all amazing people. I want to give a special shout out to Manitoba Hydro, because they really came in at the part of the beginning of this project just as we started last year in August. And they gave us additional funding because we had some complications with funding where things didn't work out. And I'm very grateful that they came in and gave us enough funding on the table to get this thing started and get the ball rolling. So I think the future for the Netley Marsh is very positive, and I think it'll be a great example for others to see what they can do on restoring some of their marsh pieces. So I want to thank you all for your support, and please remember, partnership is what's going to build the success.